Shut up and sit down.
Have you ever told a lie? I think we all have at some point. But why did you do it? Did you want to evade the consequences of your actions? Maybe you wanted to avoid confrontation or prevent someone's feelings from being hurt. Or maybe you wanted something, and lying was the best way to get it. Have you ever seen that lie snowball, becoming so large that to admit to it would be your undoing? Have you ever seen that lie snowball in the public arena? Somebody lies as a means to an end, but thousands, if not millions, see. To admit to the lie would mean losing everything you just gained. So you just keep lying, right? There's no harm in it. Nobody needs to know. When the thing you're lying about, though, is criminal activity, keeping that lie may have some unintended consequences. Whether it's prank videos online where the victims are in on the joke, or one where the crime is faked, the internet has allowed people to easily lie for personal gain. While this phenomenon may seem new, the internet is not the only tool we've ever had for mass communication. So let's go back to Victorian-era London, 1885 to be specific, and look at how a story in a newspaper resulted in a prison sentence, the age of consent being raised, and the criminalization of homosexuality. Let's talk about the Maiden tribute of modern Babylon. Hello, lovely people! Before we dive into this topic, we're going to need a content warning. The following video will discuss sex work, sex trafficking, and the sexual exploitation of minors. I will also be discussing other criminal activity, including sexual assault and harassment, kidnapping, and murder. While most of the events I will be discussing did not take place and were faked, hearing about them may be distressing. If you are uncomfortable with these topics, take a break, pause the video, or stop watching altogether. If you need, there are links to crisis support lines and sexual support clinics in the description below. I'd also like to discuss the use of language in this video. The Maiden tribute of modern Babylon took place in Victorian-era England. Therefore, the language used surrounding street-level sex work is prostitution, while the current term used, and the term I prefer to use, is sex work. In order to stay more accurate to the source material, I will be using the words prostitution and prostitute in the following discussion. All sources used in this video are listed and linked in the description, organized by subtopic, though some sources will cover more than one. They will also be listed on the end screen. All sources are accessible to the public, including the full document of the Maiden tribute of modern Babylon. The Stead resource site in particular was incredibly helpful in making this video. I have not included my sources on screen during the video because I feel this will be overwhelming. I tried my best to find reputable sources while avoiding long academic papers, which can be difficult to read. This video is also fully manually captioned so that the closed captions meet the guidelines set within the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. We on this channel are committed to making our videos accessible to as many people as possible. While this video does have captions, some of the language used, especially specific words and titles from sources, can be hard to wrap our heads around. Despite my best efforts, the content in this video may be difficult to understand for some viewers. The Maiden tribute of modern Babylon was a 4-part newspaper story, with part 1 published on July 6, 1885, in the Pall Mall Gazette. Written by W.T. Stead, it told a story about prostitution and sex trafficking in London. To understand the importance of the Maiden tribute of modern Babylon, we need to understand the cultural context. The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon was written in 1885 during first wave feminism and was heavily influenced by the beliefs of social reformers. Social reformers believed that society as a whole needed to be changed and made better. By changing society, the individual could then thrive, and ignoring society would lead to individual failure. To social reformers, prostitution was seen as a social sickness, to which the cure was white, middle-class, Christian values. There was a tie between class status and morality, with poor people being seen as immoral. Prostitutes became a target for social reformers because they were often poor and were considered sexually deviant. Many believed that by teaching prostitutes how to behave like a respectable white middle-class woman, they could be reformed. First-wave feminism called for the end of prostitution, believing this would free women from what they believed to be a life of sin. If prostitution was abolished, then public morality would increase, and women would all be perfect. White, middle class, and Christian. Right? There was also a significant moral panic that happened alongside the social reform movement. Industrialization played a major role in this. Industrialization was the process of the economy shifting towards factories and wage labor, and away from farming. This caused many people to move to cities because this is where jobs were available. With industrialization, family structures began to shift, with work taking place outside the home. Before, the family unit lived and worked together in one household. With wage labor, work now took place outside the home, and living in cities meant family members were not contained to the family home. Suddenly, young girls and women were able to be outside in the city, and without a male guardian, no less. What might happen to them in the outside world? Middle-class people looked at prostitutes and feared their daughters could be forced into a life like this, and feared that many were. Thus, the white slavery panic was born. And the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon may have been the spark that lit that flame. Okay, I know. White slavery? Really? But this is how the panic was framed. People feared their otherwise morally upstanding daughters were being kidnapped, trafficked, and forced into prostitution and sexual slavery. Like most moral panics, the white slavery panic was unfounded. There were few, if any, cases of middle-class women being trafficked. Most, if not all, prostitutes were working-class women with financial motivations. However, this fear and resulting panic did have a significant impact on the public, and we can still see some of the results of it today. So we've covered the cultural context in which the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon was written. But who wrote it? William Thomas Stead was the author of the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon. Born in 1849, he was the son of Reverend William Stead. His mother, Isabella, was politically active, leading a local campaign against the Contagious Diseases Act, which required prostitutes to undergo medical examinations. Despite protests, the act was passed into law in 1864. His mother's political activism had a lasting impact on Stead, with much of his work dedicated to furthering his causes, one of which being the repeal or reversal of the Contagious Diseases Act. He also believed that prostitution should be ended or abolished, much like social reformers, and wanted to raise the age of consent. Stead was an advocate for peace, and for his efforts was nominated several times for the Nobel Peace Prize. In 1880, Stead became the assistant editor of the Pall Mall Gazette, the paper in which the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon was published. He was lead editor from 1883 to 1889, when he resigned to found the Review of Reviews, a nonpartisan paper. In his time at the Pall Mall Gazette, Stead changed how news was reported. Stead was one of the pioneers of interviews and journalism, and shifted papers from simply reporting on stories to creating stories. He made the Pall Mall Gazette one of the most popular and influential papers while he was editor, and the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon, particularly its first part, was its most popular story. What happened in the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon to make it so influential? Before I summarize the first part of the 4-part series, The Aftermath and the Truth, I'd again like to issue a content warning. I will be discussing the sexual exploitation and trafficking of children. I recognize this is a challenging topic, so if you'd like to skip the summary of events and the consequences and go straight to the truth, skip to the timestamp shown on screen. I am going to avoid reading directly from the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon, save for a few quotes, and will instead generally summarize the article. Are we good? Then let's get into it. The Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon opens with Stead comparing the streets of London to that of ancient Greece. He recounts how sacrifices were sent every 9 years to the labyrinth, with the fates of the 7 youths and 7 maidens unknown, except that they never emerged from the labyrinth in which the Minotaur lived. This is compared to the lives of prostitutes in London, as they too were doomed, but instead of 7, these maidens numbered in the thousands. Stead's framing of prostitutes is challenging. He's at once sympathetic while still shaming them, and he sees virginity as what a woman ought to value more than life. He clearly wants to help prostitutes, especially those he believes were forced or coerced into prostitution, but he's very patronizing. Stead, as a white middle-class Christian man, was very much the ideal within a social reform worldview. He wanted to help prostitutes, and he believed to do so, they needed to be reformed. He thought they should become good Christians, and if they did this, they could escape poverty and sin. This belief frames the article. The purpose of Stead's article was to highlight how the laws regarding prostitution and the age of consent only harmed young women, while benefiting their exploiters. The young age of the victims Stead discusses is highlighted. He notes many as being only 12 or 13. This young age, he explains, prevents them from being able to resist against grown men. Some of these girls were also drugged to ensure there was no resistance. After their assault, some of these girls were coerced into continuing life as a prostitute. This was confirmed to Stead by a madam of a brothel, as she describes the way she'd shame the girls into staying, insisting they would never be accepted anywhere else. The connection between class and prostitution is also noted. Stead discusses how some parents would offer their virgin daughters to the best paying customer because they were in need of the money. Prostitution was a working class crime, not one a wealthy woman would engage in. The article consists of many real interviews, including members of parliament, a police officer, a brothel keeper, and an ex-brothel keeper. These interviews offer differing perspectives on the sex trade and prostitution in London at the time, with some, like the Member of Parliament, who dismissed the idea that these victims did not consent. The interviews themselves are not what made the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon so influential at the time. No, that was Stead's story of buying a virgin for £5. The final section of the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon is titled, A Child of 13 Bought for £5. Stead tells a story about a 13-year-old girl, Lily, who was bought for £5, 3 up front, 2 after her virginity was confirmed by a midwife. Stead describes Lily's parents as poor, dissolute, and indifferent to everything but drink. Lily's innocence in personality and physicality is highlighted. The man who purchased Lily had enlisted the help of a woman whose job it was to obtain Lily, have her virginity certified, purchase chloroform from the midwife, and drug her. The purchaser and the woman are left anonymous. Stead describes Lily waking up and screaming when a man, the presumed purchaser, entered the room. The article ends with, "Many a similar cry will be raised this very night in the brothels of London, unheeded by man, but not unheard by the pitying ear of heaven." Lily's fate is left unknown to the reader. This was part 1 of the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon, which is the best known because of Lily. Lily's story is upsetting. After reading it, you want to do anything you can to stop that from ever happening to anyone. Though anonymous in the article, Lily's purchaser was found. Rebecca Jarrett had done the work to buy Lily and have her virginity certified, but she was acting on Stead's orders. Stead had published a story about how he purchased a virgin for £5. Unfortunately for Stead, there's this thing that happens when you publicly admit to committing a crime. That thing is called consequences for your actions, and in Stead's case, that meant a trial and jail time. So Lily was a fake name given to protect the girl's identity. This wasn't an effective disguise because Lily's mother read the article and recognized her daughter. Lily's real name was Eliza Armstrong, and her mother was not pleased. She believed she had been duped and had sold Eliza under false circumstances. Ms. Armstrong went to the police and charged everyone involved in procuring and selling Eliza. Stead was charged with indecent assault and child abduction, and after 2 trials, he was convicted. Stead was sentenced to 3 months in prison. You do the crime, you do the time, right? Stead clearly published a story about how he hired Jarrett to find and purchase a child to sell into prostitution, which is illegal, and is something he wanted to make even more illegal. If he did the illegal thing, like he told the thousands of readers of the Pall Mall Gazette he did, he should face the consequences, right? Well, Eliza's story didn't end after part 1 of the Maiden tribute of modern Babylon. Despite what Stead wanted his readers to think about the horrors she faced, Eliza was actually relatively fine. She was never sold into prostitution. Yes, she did undergo the virgin certification, and she was drugged, both of which were likely traumatic. But afterwards, she was sent to a Salvation Army house in Paris. Stead, instead of just reporting on one of the cases he claims were so frequent, constructed his own. He was not reporting on the news. He was creating it. What Stead did was manufacture a story so he could get the legislative changes he wanted. He lied to his readers. He told them a story as if he had just heard it, and he left the readers to believe the victim he was discussing was sold into prostitution. The truth was, he made it all up, and he went to great lengths to make his lie convincing. Stead's lie worked. Readers were convinced and wholly believed the story was real. I can't help but wonder if the reception would have been different if people had known Stead made up Lily in the story. Would people have cared as much if they knew the story was a lie? I don't know, but I do know that this lie got Stead exactly what he wanted. So what were the impacts of the Maiden tribute of modern Babylon on the world at the time? Let's start with a more lighthearted one. George Bernard Shaw, the playwright behind Pygmalion, was inspired by Stead's story and named his lead character Eliza. Pygmalion debuted on stage in 1913 and was later adapted into both the musical and film My Fair Lady. So, because of Stead's article, Julie Andrews won an Oscar. Neat! Now, for the more serious impacts. Stead did achieve his goal of raising the age of consent for girls in England. The Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1885 was passed on August 14, 1885. It included many changes to previous legislation, including raising the age of consent for women from 13 to 16, criminalizing the use of drugs, force, or intimidation to abduct girls for prostitution, allowing for those who would permit underage sex on their premises to be punished, criminalizing the abduction of girls under 18 for purposes of carnal knowledge, meaning to have sex with. Magistrates were given the power to issue search warrants for missing women. Courts were given the power to take a girl away from her legal guardian if they condoned her seduction, meaning they allowed her to engage in prostitution. Brothels were able to be tried in quick, informal trials. The categories for assault dependent on the victim's age were changed. Assaults of those under 13 were now considered felonies, and assaults of those between 13 and 16 were misdemeanors. This is a long list, and many of the changes made were probably for the better in my opinion, especially raising the age of consent. There was one more amendment included in this act though, and that was the criminalization of gross indecency between males. In short, any and all sex between two men, even if they were both consenting adults, was criminalized. While this bill raised the age of consent for girls, it also fully criminalized homosexuality. Only for men though, so lesbians, you're cool under this law. Or more likely the lawmakers couldn't conceive of lesbians existing, but that's a topic for another time, so moving on. The Contagious Diseases Act, which Stead had also wanted to overturn, was repealed in 1886. So through the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon, Stead had accomplished his two primary political goals. It is worth noting that Stead was not the only one who wanted these changes to England's legislation. Many first-wave feminists also championed these causes and laid the groundwork for these changes to be made. One notable feminist is Josephine Butler, who had been working towards raising the age of consent since the 1860s. Stead did not pioneer these causes, but the Maiden Tribute of Modern Babylon did expedite the changes. As for Stead, he died in 1912 after leading a fairly eventful life. Being a spiritualist, there were rumors that he had predicted his own death and had come to terms with it before it happened. In 1886 and 1892, Stead wrote two sinking stories, 2 decades before his death on the Titanic. Great, so over a century ago, some guy lied about buying a child and a bunch of laws got changed. What does this have to do with now? Who even reads the newspaper anymore? Well, the medium has changed, dear viewer, but the motive has not. We aren't in the Victorian era anymore. We're in the internet age. Social media makes it easier than ever to share our thoughts with an audience of friends and strangers, and with the potential for the world to watch. You might even get famous. Who knows what could come of a tweet or a video. Sometimes videos go viral without intending to. There's a resulting 15 seconds of fame, and we never hear from them again. But this fame, or sometimes infamy, can be maintained. You take what got you noticed and you keep doing it. But you do it more, and you do it bigger. You up the stakes each time, attracting more and more viewers, making more and more money. To get clout, you need to take risks. Okay, pause. What precisely is clout? According to the most reputable source available, Urban Dictionary, it is being famous and having influence. Merriam-Webster supports this definition, defining it as pull or influence. When describing what people want to achieve through success online, clout may be more applicable than fame. I mean, people who've gained their fame through social media aren't called influencers for nothing, right? With online influence and fame, creators can make a lot of money. To put it bluntly, sponsorships, AdSense, and merch sales all bring in differing amounts of revenue. But it is revenue nonetheless. When online creators want clout and want internet fame, they also directly financially benefit. So creators want more views and subscribers, which makes them more famous, in other words, getting them more clout. With this clout, creators can make more money. There's a financial incentive as well as the incentive for fame. Anyways, clout has lost all meaning as a word at this point, so moving on. Do you remember Sam Pepper? I do, and sadly he's making a comeback on TikTok. He may have been the one to make the excuse, "It was a social experiment," so well known. Sam Pepper was a well-known YouTube prankster with over 2.2 million subscribers at his height. Pepper had 2 infamous videos: fake hand-ass pinch prank, wherein he went around pinching women's behinds without their consent, and killing best friend prank, where he kidnapped a friend of his and led him to believe he was watching his best friend be executed. These videos were not well received, to put it mildly. Released in 2014, the fake hand-ass pinch prank is what spawned the social experiment excuse. Pepper apparently wanted all this outrage, actually, and was trying to demonstrate how people treat women who are victims of sexual assault differently than we treat men. This excuse was not accepted by many, due to the fact he still, filmed himself assaulting women and put it on the internet for clout. There were also multiple sexual assault allegations against Pepper after this video's release, and while he was investigated by the LAPD, the witness refused to testify and the charges were dropped. The Killing Best Friend prank video was released in 2015. In it, Sam Goldbrack is made to believe he is watching the murder of his best friend Colby Brock after they were kidnapped. Goldbrack seems traumatized because he believed this was real. Pepper received backlash again because, I don't know, maybe watching someone go through a traumatic event isn't very funny, actually. People petitioned to have Pepper removed from the platform after this event, but nothing came of it. Until 2016. In 2016, Pepper posted an apology video where he admitted to all of his pranks being fake and staged. The women who had their derrieres pinched, they were asked beforehand if they were comfortable being included in the video and briefed on what would happen. Goldbrack, who had been traumatized after believing he'd watched his best friend's murder, he was acting. As prank videos on YouTube were getting increasingly outlandish and extreme, Pepper felt the need to keep up. Shocking pranks brought the views and the clout, so he made the videos the best way he knew how, by faking them. Pepper admitted he had been reluctant to admit his pranks were fake because of potential backlash, so he instead let himself become one of the most hated figures online. Admitting to his lie would have lost him his platform because everyone who believed in the authenticity of his pranks would be deceived. When Pepper finally admitted his pranks were fake, it was in a final apology video before he deleted all the videos from his channel and quit the internet for good. In admitting to his lie, he lost his platform. Except he didn't, because now he's back on TikTok with over 4 million followers. So maybe actions don't have consequences, actually. I'd like to make it very clear that I do not think Sam Pepper is an okay person because he lied about doing the terrible things instead of actually doing them. He still actively profited off what the audience believed was the sexual harassment and assault of women, as well as trauma and murder. The audience was supposed to believe these were true, and Pepper's success was dependent on this belief. The sexual assault allegations are also worth noting. In my opinion, he only admitted his pranks were fake because he was receiving so much backlash for pretending they were true that his career was in jeopardy regardless. I think his decision to leave the internet was a good choice, and I am disappointed to see that he has amassed a larger following on TikTok than he had on YouTube. So what does Sam Pepper faking pranks have to do with Stead publishing a story to get legislation changed? Well, both used their respective mediums to spread a lie or lies to achieve their goal. Stead used the newspaper to spread a false story about child prostitution with the goal of raising the age of consent. Pepper used the internet, mostly YouTube, to post videos of fake pranks with the goal of gaining views and clout. In both cases, admitting to the lies told could have undone, or did undo, the desired goal. Had Stead admitted his story was fake, he may not have gotten the desired laws changed as quickly as he had. Pepper did admit to his lies and lost all of the views, subscribers, and clout he'd gained. For a time, anyway. Though the goals of Stead and Pepper differ drastically, they share their questionable criminality and use of current media. Lying can be an effective means to an end for those willing to build themselves on a foundation of dishonesty, and effective use of a platform can help spread those lies even faster. So where does this leave us? What is the moral of this story? My point here is to say that people lying and communicating that lie to a large audience to achieve a goal is not a new phenomenon. Some shockingly specific parallels can be drawn between events that happened less than a decade ago and ones that happened over a century ago. As the audience, we should be critical of what people present to us. Healthy skepticism is a good alternative to a full-blown moral panic unfolding. We have the power to give creators what they want, whether it's fame, money, political action, or any number of other potential goals. Always be willing to read deeper and think critically about what the author may want you to believe. Remember, we've probably all told a lie. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. All of the sources I used in this video are listed on screen as well as in the description below. If you liked this video and would like to learn more, consider watching some of the other videos on this channel. If watching videos isn't enough, consider looking into sexuality, marriage, and family studies at the St. Jerome's University campus at the University of Waterloo. I first learned about the Maiden tribute of modern Babylon in SMF 318, History of Sexuality, the Modern Period. You can check out the course calendar, linked below, to read the overviews of all the courses SMF has to offer. Thank you and have a good day.